So wokeism, first off, is really just another term for what we might call cultural Marxism. It is a way in which a progressive ideology has been injected into our society, in the church, in our school systems, in the medical field, all these different politics, all these different arenas, to really set up a framework of oppressor versus oppressed, and really divide people based upon these external markers like race, skin color, socioeconomic status, sexuality, sexual preference, all of these things. Ultimately, wokeism exists for one purpose, and that is to tear down the framework of society as we know it. And I'm not saying that trying to be extreme or radical. That's really their own language that they would utilize, that they want to see the collapse of kind of the old system that they view as oppressive in order to have a new system rise up from within. And so wokeism it has one goal, and that is deconstruction.
And you use the word injected into schools, institutions, church, almost as if it's on purpose.
It is on purpose. Yeah, wokeism is 100% on purpose. This is not just, we didn't just get here. Like, kids didn't just wake up one day and say, hey, I think I'm, Astro Boy or Star Gender or something like that. I mean, we're here because there has been a lot of marketing dollars. Look, I don't want to go or sound conspiracy theorist on this, but there are I don't even want to put the word but in there. There's a tremendous amount of money that has gone into pushing these ideas into schools, into church seminaries, into the medical industry. And I think you trace this, what are you going to find? You're going to find groups like Open Society with connections to Soros. You're going to find ties to communist China. You're going to find ties in these different areas. Why? Because all of these groups have the interest to weaken the framework of America. How do you weaken the framework of America? You pull us away from biblical values. You pull us away from core, from the nuclear family, from really having, strong communities and local communities. And you create chaos. You create chaos on college campuses. You create chaos in the home. You create chaos in identity. And this weakens the nation. And I think it's being done for a very specific purpose, and it's being done on purpose 100%.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the things that you just shared there, I mean, if you have one eye open, you can look across society and see these things beginning to fall apart. But how far back does this intentionally go? Like, when did this originate?
Yeah. So, if we're just talking about critical theory in general, you can go back to the 1700s, start seeing the evolution of this, kind of a new framework to look at society. What most people don't understand is that, the reason why I talk, at least one of the reasons why I talk so much about the faith component on this is because a lot of this began in faith communities, or at least with, from a theological lens. I mean, deconstruction and postmodernism were responses to a theological framework initially. I mean, this really starts with, how do we read the Bible? Is it historic? Is there something else? Is this fable? Is the text saying something that we think it might not be saying? Is there a different way to read it? And you see this evolve. So we can look at, George Hegel. We can look at, before him, Immanuel Kant. You can see the evolution in German theologians that kind of work your way up until, really World War I and World War II. I mean, Hitler was a tremendous proponent of I'm using a modern term. He wouldn't have probably used this term, but he was a proponent of what was known as the historical Jesus movement, which was really an early deconstruction movement of seeing Jesus as the great social justice warrior, or in his words, the supermensch, the man of the people, the superhuman, figure, rather than the savior of the world. And that played a role. And so this is, we're well over 100 years of history of evolving towards this. Now, again, the left, because of the way in which progressive ideology works, they have a tendency to eat their own. And so, Marx was a young Hegelian. He followed Hegel's work. But, he would criticize Hegel. What happens with Marxist followers? They become neo-Marxist. They like aspects of Marx, but then they criticize Marx. So, I'm not saying that if Hegel was here today, he'd be for everything that's happening. But you had some people that lit a match, like Hegel and Marx and others after them. And what we're seeing today is the spread of that fire. And each generation, because the nature of progressivism is we have to progress further than the generation before us. And so what was normal yesterday is now the oppressive dominant structure that is preventing us from living out this true emotional revolution or societal revolution or economical revolution. So we have to push the envelope to this new thing, and that new thing becomes the thing that's going to break us through it. And it's just this never ending cycle of pulling people deeper into really insanity, and you get further and further away from anything that feels logical, that feels moral, that feels at all in line with a Western civilization like we know it.
How have we gotten here? I mean, we're talking, you said 1700. So, we're over 300 years kind of into this process, but it feels like that turbo button has kind of been pushed now, right? Like it's just on an acceleration mode. How did it get to this point, and what can we do? Like, is it capable of being pulled back and pushed in the other direction?
Yeah, it took a long time for, and I want to be clear here. I don't think that there are, one or two people sitting in a room going, "Wahaha," we have to tear down everything. This is an ideological framework first and foremost. Now there are leftist elites. We could talk about the World Health Organization. We could talk about some of these World Economic Forum and these groups that are certainly driving a lot of this progressive ideology and globalist framework in society. But these guys don't even, they're doing what they sincerely believe. I don't think they want to see themselves as supervillains, but they're pushing ideas that are really anti-Christ. And I'm not trying to put a label of somebody is the anti-Christ, but these are anti-biblical values. These are anti really Western ideas or Judeo-Christian ideas. And so that's what's being, pushed and injected today. I think that there's been an evolution on this, right? Each generation has taken it further and further and further. This is why we have, some people that were fighting for same-sex marriage that are now all of a sudden looking at the trans community and going, whoa, 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 I don't want anything to do with this. This has gone way too far. We did not fight for same-sex marriage so that you guys could go out and twerk in front of, third graders. Like, that's not what we did this for. And so you're seeing a little bit of, disagreement among progressives themselves, because progressivism has gone even further, right? I mean, if we're alive long enough, we're going to see stuff crazier than this. This is 10 years ago. You go, I never thought it would get this bad. And now 10 years later, you're going, I never thought it would get this bad. Well, guess what we're going to say 10 years from now? I never thought it would get this bad, right? Because there's this evolution of the way in which progressivism it just exists by nature. How do we fix it? Well, we have to go back to see where has it been, where is it infiltrated? If you don't correct the schools or start new ones, if you don't, really dismantle things like the medical, kind of the big pharma, big medical industry, the way in which it is, if you don't look differently at things like immigration, if you don't protect national sovereignty, if you continue, and here's a perfect example, right? We have a tendency to, on the right, to react, okay? And James Lindsay, has some brilliant stuff on this, talking about how that the reaction is the action, right? It is the activism. It is that it's not what the left does initially or what the progressive ideology initially does. It's the reaction to that they're really trying to get across.